Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor and the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. We all have a profession, we have an occupation, but not all of our professions and occupations have their own category of jokes. Attorneys, hey, who hasn't heard a lawyer joke, right? So I thought we'd bring in an attorney, not for the jokes, but we all need some law assistance, consultation, and just some information to help us get through our days and our lives. And the attorney that is joining us today on Mount Pleasant Podcast, I'm Brian Cleary. Trey Harrell is joining us. Trey, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of our Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And, we can do some few jokes, right? If you can't laugh at yourself, you really shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So, you got to have fun with it.
That being the case, is there a favorite lawyer joke that you've heard over and over?
I mean, I've heard them all from, calling me a shark to an ambulance chaser to whatever else. I prefer being called a shark than an ambulance chaser, but either way, they're all funny and they're all laugh at them and you just got to enjoy them.
Well, that's a good thing. That's the great attitude to have, to laugh at them. And I'll remember shark, not ambulance chaser as we go along. Now, Trey, you're an attorney here in the
ambulance catcher, not ambulance chaser. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
So you're an attorney here in the Low Country, but let's start from this. You're a native of the Low Country. You grew up where?
I am. I'm one of the very fortunate ones that was born and raised in the Low Country. I was born it used to be St. Francis Hospital in downtown, now where Roper is. Been here all my life, except for when I was at South Carolina and when I spent some time in Columbia as a prosecutor. But other than that, we've lived here in the Low Country. My wife and I now make our home Mount Pleasant, and we absolutely love it. In fact, it's funny, when we were living in Columbia, after we first got married and I was working up there, she got pregnant. She told me, you can live anywhere you want as long as it's Bell Hall. So, we live in Bell Hall now. So,
So your family background is in the insurance business. Mm-hmm. You've become an attorney. Was that just something you were rebelling against mom and dad? How is it that you became an attorney?
We make that joke a lot. My family is in the insurance business and has been. My grandfather started Harrell Insurance in 1963, and they've been serving the Low Country ever since then. Give my dad the free plug, might as well, right? But with that being said, when I got back from South Carolina, I had worked in pharmaceutical sales and enjoyed it and really cared about like finance and that aspect. So when I actually went to law school, I went to law school thinking that I wasn't going to actually practice, that I was going to handle it from a finance side, like insurance and finance. And actually, by happenstance, ended up in a on-campus interview with the Charleston County Public Defender's Office. And in talking to that public defender, had some time kind of in between when I was going to be able to start other internships, and took an internship in the public defender's office. Loved actually practicing law. Decided I want to be a prosecutor instead. But decided that I was actually going to practice law and go that route. And it's just, I've loved it ever since. Haven't looked back. And insurance industry is great, but majority of what I do is help people recover from the insurance folks, when they've been in car wrecks. So I still have that insurance background.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because car accidents, one of the things that's been in the news lately, we've seen collisions and we've seen some high-speed chases and police-related things that have ended up in folks getting hurt, and sadly, some fatalities as well. Since it's been such a big news story here lately in the Low Country, can you talk a little bit about that and where you see that coming down in terms of the law? Particularly
with the high-speed chase area and avenue, we had those we had numerous tragedies lately. We've had somebody as recent as last Friday pass, as well as the Dantzler ladies who passed on Highway 17. And additionally, there was a lawsuit filed in Dorchester County, and it kind of brings into a broad perspective when you talk about high-speed chases and auto accidents. There's a fine line between officers doing their duty and going, maybe being overzealous. But the issue is you can't stop law enforcement from chasing the bad guys. They got to catch the bad guys. The best way you can protect yourself is having insurance and having the proper insurance coverage, so that if you are in that kind of car accident, because the guy running from the police probably doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance. And so with that being said, if you have the proper insurance, you can contact a lawyer and he can help you find the avenue to get it resolved, to get your medical bills paid, to get that step moving in the right direction to move on with your life. So while we've seen an uptick in those accidents, we've also seen an uptick in law enforcement doing the right thing and saying, hey, we were wrong on this avenue. We're going to make it right. And no, we were doing our job on this side. And so when you see that, it's a good thing, particularly in Dorchester, that they had the insurance that they had so that they're able to recover and help that lady get better.
Podcast advertising is the new way to reach your best audience. Podcast advertising gives your business a voice of authority. Be heard. Advertise on one of our podcasts. Visit carolinapodcasts.com or call 843-345-7012.
You're listening to the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Someone gets in an auto accident, and you hear all the time, you see TV commercials or whatever. The first thing you ought to do, call an attorney. Now, some people would relate to that or look at it and go, hey, that's just because the attorneys are trying to rip off the insurance companies. They're just in it for the money and stuff. But there are, obviously, actually incidents where people need help. So in that situation, what do you advise a person to do? He or she's been in an accident. What are the steps they should take?
Well, first and foremost, about the insurance company, if insurance companies paid out everybody exactly like they were supposed to, I wouldn't have a job. There wouldn't be as many lawyers as there are out there dealing with personal injury, number one. Number two, I don't think the first thing you should do when you've been in an auto accident is call an attorney. I think it's one of the first few things you should do, but the first thing you should do is contact a medical provider, because whether you are feeling the causes of the injury, of the accident or not, you need to make sure that you're okay. And we tell our clients consistently, our biggest goal is to get you better, get you back where you were. And the step to do that is to contact a medical provider. Prime example, I had a client that was in a hit and run accident about a month and a half ago. Didn't feel any pain. He was a good friend of mine. I said, look, just go to the doctor. Just let him check you out. And they checked him out a little bit. Some pain started to happen. He finally listened to me and went and got an MRI. Turns out he had 3 bulged discs. So it's one of those scenarios where you have to get yourself checked out to make sure you're okay. And I don't think there's an insurance company out there that would argue with me that they don't want to make sure that their clients are okay. They don't want to just wrap up a claim quickly, just like some of these law firms out there that might be quick and move things quickly if that occurs. That's not what we do, and that's not what most lawyers in Charleston do. The goal is to make sure the individual that is injured or harmed gets back to where they were. And that's kind of our focus. If you go and check us out on Google, if you Google Trey Harrell attorney, we've got all 5-star reviews, and we're very proud of that, purely because they talk about how we treat clients like family. We work towards them. We put them first and our profits second. We're very proud of those comments that they make, because that's kind of the way you paint that brush. When we were talking about the lawyer jokes, that's how you change that narrative. If you are a client-focused, individual-focused firm doing the things you're supposed to do, then you're going to not be told about how many lawyers it takes to screw in a light bulb, right? So, that's kind of where it is. And that's kind of what we do at my firm in a nutshell. Majority of our practice is personal injury. We've been fortunate enough to do all types of law and been voted by the viewers of Mount Pleasant Magazine numerous times best of in various categories. And we're honored and thrilled by that. One of them being personal injury. So we're just honored to be able to help folks do what they need to do to get better.
We're talking the law today on the Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by attorney Trey Harrell. Trey is from Mount Pleasant, but Trey, your office is in Charleston. Now, where exactly can people find you?
It is in West Ashley. It's in the shopping center named Herald Square. I know the landlord, so it worked out. It's over by Citadel Mall, but we handle cases all over the state. When I came back into private practice after being working with the high intensity drug areas task force, my main focus was to have an office that was virtual and could handle folks anywhere and everywhere, because, I came back into private practice in late 2020. And so we didn't know if we were going to have to shut everything down or not. So although our office is in West Ashley, we not only handle cases all over the Lowcountry, we handle cases all over the state of South Carolina. In fact, I was on the phone this morning with somebody in Greenville who signed up with us, who we're going to help. So it's while we're located in West Ashley, that's where we are. But we can work everywhere, all over the state.
And you can check out Trey online, the Attorney Harrell, and it's HARRELL.com is where to find them online. Now, the picture that we're looking at, Trey, I assume is from your office, and you've read every single one of those books behind you?
Every single one of them thoroughly, and can quote all of them. But the problem is some of them are for the 1940s. So there's nothing inappropriate in there or anything. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. It's fun. And, we've talked business for most of this podcast. Let's talk fun. I tell you, the thing I'm most proud about is not the books and not the law degree and not what we do. If you can see behind me, I've got pictures of my wife and my kids. Being a dad is by far the best job I get to have. I have a little girl who is very, very active in her swim team, and a son who, I don't mean to brag, even though he's 2, he's the front runner for the 2036 Heisman Trophy. So just to I want that on the record, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. So no, I'm kidding.
And I have to assume he'll be going to Columbia, of course, be a Gamecock. But the big question that I need to ask you is, you are a diehard Gamecock fan. You would, I have to think, fully represent a Clemson Tiger fan if they came to you, though.
Oh, happily. In fact, my executive assistant, who is awesome, who makes this office run super smoothly, is a Clemson graduate. So if you're a Carolina fan, you can deal with me. If you're a Clemson fan, you can deal with her. So like I said, we can handle anybody all over the state. We're very diverse.
And let's do it here. Get a quick prediction on the upcoming 2022 season. Gamecocks ended pretty strong. Is this the year maybe Clemson goes down? Is this the year definitely for Carolina to break through?
1,000%. Spencer Rattler is going to just show why he was such a top recruit, and go off. And I'll tell you, that's a great story if you really think about it, because he was a top recruit. He was at Oklahoma. He was doing all the great things that he was doing. And then I think he got his head got a little too big, and he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do, and he got benched. Now he comes to South Carolina with a chip on his shoulder. If he can go out there and prove, it's a true story about redemption and second chances and all that good stuff, which, can lead him to win a Heisman Trophy. I know it's kind of a Heisman-centric podcast, isn't it?
That's it. We're talking football and the law today on Mount Pleasant Podcast. I'm Brian Cleary, joined by attorney Trey Harrell. Trey is a South Carolina fan, but he's also a local attorney. Now, you did spend some time as a federal attorney. You were mentioning that. What is it that brought you from that back to private practice?
When I initially graduated from law school, I was fortunate enough to clerk for a judge in Charleston. Then I was I was offered a job to go work as a state prosecutor, and I did that for a while and thoroughly enjoyed it. Really getting hands dirty and diving in. I was representing this First Circuit in Orangeburg County. It was a blast. But then I had the opportunity to go into private practice and did that for a few years. And I was fortunate enough under the Trump administration, when certain U.S. attorneys, there was an opening in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the High Intensity Drug Areas Task Force, which means the folks that try to stop the kilos from coming into the state, and, the really bad, very drugs, the stuff that is very crucial to protecting our state. I had an opportunity to work for that task force for a year, and it was phenomenal. And after we were done with that, I decided it was time to go back into private practice and shifted back into it. But I will tell you, being fortunate enough to work with federal law enforcement, particularly the DEA, you should sleep better at night, and everyone should sleep better at night knowing that the DEA is doing the things that they're doing, because they are keeping us safe. There were things that I was fortunate enough to be privy to when I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that really showed how much work our federal law enforcement, whether it's FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, those entities work in connection with our local law enforcement, Port Authority police, to protect us. And I was fortunate enough to prosecute those cases. And it was just a very interesting avenue. And it was a phenomenal experience, and probably makes me a better private practice attorney because I see things from a little bit bigger picture.
I have to ask, since obviously you've been in the courtroom, you've prosecuted like that, have you had the opportunity, because not many people have, and I think everybody wants to just stand up one time and say, I object, Your Honor?
I have. I've done that multiple times, actually. But it's a very interesting way when you do that and you talk about it on TV. I always tell my clients when I'm meeting with them, I'm not Perry Mason. I'm not Johnny Cochran. The rules actually after the O.J. Simpson trial changed drastically. And so you can't do the things Johnny Cochran did back then, but it's objection is said very regularly. But it's not as glorifying as it is on the movies. Particularly when I was a clerk for a judge, I got to witness hundreds of trials and was able to watch that and watch the different ways folks objected. And, it's always entertaining to watch different people's styles. So, but I think the best part about standing up in court is when you get to stand up and say, I'm for so-and-so, on behalf of so-and-so, whether it was my days on behalf of the government, on behalf of the state, on behalf of this individual who's been injured and I'm trying to help them. It's just a really good feeling to know you're responsible and people trust you enough, whether it was the state trusting me with things or an individual trusting me with things now. It's just a really good feeling to have that trust put on you and go for it. And let me make this very clear. I don't take that for granted. Just like I don't take for granted being a dad to my little girl or my little boy. You're very fortunate to be put in these situations in life. Just like I think you don't take for granted being the host of the Mount Pleasant podcast.
Absolutely not. It's something I enjoy. I love doing, and I'll keep doing. And as we go through things and talk to you, you're somebody who has law practice. You've got experience. You talk about auto injury. You talk about personal injury. But let me switch gears a little bit because you do estate planning.
I do.
And it's not the sexy part of the law, but that's a big part that everybody at some point has to have some knowledge about, deal with. Give me a couple of tips in terms of estate planning for an individual. Why do I need to go see you as an attorney to help me through those?
I always like to say, we have a little saying around it. If you have kids, you need a will. So because there are so many things that are wrapped into the law, that having everything just laid out is a much better scenario to be at and be in, because your family, when you pass away, your family is going to be grieving, hopefully, right? Hopefully they're not happy when you pass away. Hopefully they're grieving. And when they're grieving, you don't want them to have to deal with the intricacies of the probate system or estate planning or arguing over here or there. And so by being able just to lay that out, it just makes everything a lot easier on them. Additionally, what a lot of folks don't realize is if you pass away without a will, we call that intestate in under the law. And if you pass away intestate, and for example, in my situation, if I didn't have a will and I passed away, my wife would get half and my kids would split the other half. So think about that. Most people just assume, oh, my kids are young. My kids are 6 and almost 3. So they don't need to have half of my estate, right? It needs to be protected for them until they're older. And so you want to make sure that it's lined up so that it just as clear as a piece of paper that says, hey, everything goes to my wife. Makes everything a whole lot easier going down the process and getting it done, especially and additionally, if you have children and a spouse and you and your spouse pass away, you need to lay out when you want your kids to be able to get whatever benefit of your estate, and also who's going to get your children. You need that laid out because that's just the biggest thing that you can think of. So majority of my estate planning practice is helping young families. We do trusts and we do all that other stuff as well, but majority of it is drafting wills for friends and families. And we're not that expensive because it's more important to me to get that out. It's not a very complicated, I'm probably going to get in trouble in the legal world for saying it's not a very complicated document. So we can get it in and out fast. Typically we do it for a flat fee. So you know that you're coming in and the call is free, whether it's estate planning or auto accidents, calling me and asking me a question is for free. So why not? I mean, what's the worst thing that happens? I tell you that I can't help you, and here's a number of a lawyer that can. That's what we do.
Well, let me toss out two scenarios on estate planning that I think people kind of get into. One, at what age should I be thinking about that? And two, I don't have a lot, so I don't really need to have that. I don't own a lot. I don't own a business. What do you say to those folks?
I mean, I think that's, I'm going to give you the very typical lawyer question. It depends. The lawyer answer me, it depends, So I think the most important thing to focus on is if you have kids, you need a will. Plain and simple. It's very easy to remember. It's almost as easy as to remember as 843-636 Trey. But if you have kids, you need a will. So that is just what we would point everybody to, and the way your thought process needs to go through. And that's the easiest way to answer it. That's the less complicated way to answer it.
Now, you talked a little bit ago about watching an attorney, and I think a lot of people's mindset with attorneys is what they see in TV and what they see in the movies. So as someone who's been in the courtroom, as a practicing private attorney, as a federal prosecutor, what does TV get right and what are they just way off on?
I like that question. TV and movies, they hit a handful of the points right. Terminology is typically done right, and so you can understand the terminology, but a lot of it is very, very dramatized. And if you're to go into court flailing your arms and yelling and saying these things, a judge is gonna shut you down real quick. And you got to remember, while you see these snippets on TV, trials are normally weeks long or close to a week long. And so a jury is watching you for a long time. So if you get in there and are bombastic and moving around, they're going to realize that you're just a big talker and full of hot air. And so if what's really different from TV and movies is how calculated trial attorneys are and how laid out it is. And one of the things that TV never hits on, particularly that's law for law nerds, is chain and evidentiary issues, because you can't just throw something into court. You have to lay it out and lay how you got there. What we call in the law is a foundation to get it into court. And that's pretty boring stuff, to be bluntly honest with you. For example, if you have a DNA sample, everybody talks about DNA from Law and Order and all that. You not only have to, you have to talk about from where it was swabbed to how it got to the courtroom that day and lay it all out. We call it chain of custody. That gets pretty boring because it's this cop got it here, this officer got it here, this doctor, So it can be a pretty boring layout thing to lay that foundation. But I'll tell you what TV does get right, particularly a movie. One of my favorite lawyer movies is Lincoln Lawyer. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that Matthew McConaughey movie. Mm-hmm. And the initial scene in the very beginning of that movie where he's trying to get to court and he's moving and he's talking to the judge and he's kind of talking with the other lawyers and they're having their small talk, some of that stuff is not dead on, but a lot of that's very true. It's a very collegial atmosphere, and it needs to be. And TV a lot of times gets that right in some occasions, and it needs to be because you got to move the sludge. You got to think about how many arrests, how many cases, and all that stuff that's there. And so when TV shows lawyers being collegial, you're really showing how it moves. And so it's kind of that.
So for somebody watching TV, they see a lot of lawyer commercials these days. You don't have a phone number that has all the same digits, but if somebody does want a free consultation with you, that number they can reach you again at
is 843-636 Trey, 8739 Trey. So it's 636 Trey. And a lot of the ads on TV and the numbers and the phone numbers and the things they do is you've got to remember that particularly personal injury lawyers, they're running a small business. Some of the firms are bigger, but for example, I've got 5 employees. That's a small business. A lot of the other law firms that you see on TV maybe have a handful of attorneys and a handful of support staff, but it's a small business that's paying taxes and provide to the economy. And so when you see that, and a lot of people want to make jokes about those commercials, which trust me, they're fun to make fun of sometimes, right? But you got to remember it's the practice of law in a lot of cases is a small business. And so they're just trying to do what they've got to do to get the clients to give them a call. So they can help them, because that's pretty important. You take an oath as a lawyer when you get admitted to the bar that you will help folks and that you'll be ethical in doing so. And so that's ethical, and they're wanting to help folks. But they've also got to feed their staff, they got to pay their staff so the staff can feed their families. And I take great pride in the fact that I have numerous employees and created jobs for those people. And so to bring that all back to the initial question you asked me is, those jingles and those numbers, I think instead of having all the same number, 636 Trey is better, because you know who you're calling.
Absolutely.
But they're going to tell you something else is better. But of course, I think 636 Trey is better. But they're doing what they can to get the attention of clients so that they can provide for their families and their staff's families and all the other folks that are involved in it. So as we make fun of it and we laugh about it, it's there. And also remember, when people say bad things about personal injury lawyers, if insurance companies did everything right every time, we wouldn't have personal injury lawyers. And think about how many personal injury lawyers we have, so you can kind of deduce that from there.
And for people who are looking for more information about your firm, you've got a really intense and good website. And I say intense in a good way. There's a lot of great information on there. Where can people find you online? They
can find us at attorneyharrell.com, or you can Google Trey Harrell Lawyer and we'll pop up. But attorneyharrell.com, or give us a call. If you can't remember attorneyharrell.com, give us a call at 843-636-TREY. And we're happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
And will you take questions about upcoming Gamecock football?
I would prefer that, particularly as the season rolls on and we're performing the way I think we're going to perform. We'll talk about it, but I'll tell you this much: I'm a man, and if I'm wrong on us performing, I'll still take the call to get razzed a little bit.
And you're in Mount Pleasant. Obviously, you're not moving from Mount Pleasant because Mrs. is saying no.
Mrs. Harrell is saying, Amber Harrell, my beautiful, very, very patient, very, very understanding bride, really likes where we are, and I have the added benefit of really loving where we are and where we put our roots in to set up and raise our family. We're not leaving Mount Pleasant anytime soon, most likely, and we definitely ain't leaving the Low Country anytime soon. I've been here since 1983 when I was born. Been resident. Even when we lived in Columbia, my address still said, a Charleston address. So we've been a Charleston, through and through, a Low Country through and through, and watching it grow the way it is. I remember, I don't know when you moved to Charleston, but I can remember, particularly when I was in high school, you could get anywhere in 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, not so much now.
Not so much. You could get from West Ashley to Sullivan's Island in 20 minutes. And I remember that because when I was in high school, my curfew was midnight, and I knew as long as I left by 11:30, I could get home and check in. And my dad wouldn't yell at me, or yell at me as much, but I probably deserved it, so it was okay.
Well, we look forward to the 2036 Heisman Trophy winner being featured in the pages of Mount Pleasant magazine, because Certainly. Now we know that's going to happen.
Yep.
And we appreciate your time today on Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thank you.
You need an attorney. You need someone local who knows what it's all about. Mount Pleasant, office in Charleston, but available for folks all over the Low Country. Trey Harrell, thanks so much for joining us today on Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming to us as well. Again, Attorney Harrell, Harrell online, and the Mount Pleasant Podcast. It's a service of Mount Pleasant Magazine. We appreciate you taking the time to be with myself and Trey today. I'm Brian Cleary. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast. Your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.